Hello and welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. The Yankees sweep in Cincinnati. They are the best team in the majors in May. We're going to do a Cincinnati series recap, and our friend Joon Lee joins us again.
Boys are hot.
Hello and welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. My name is Liam. I'm joined by Jake. How's it going, Jake?
Not awful. I told you that I sneezed so hard that I managed to puncture something in my vocal cords, apparently, and I lost my voice for a solid 3 hours, but I'm finally getting it back now. So that's been a struggle all day, but we're finally getting to that point where I'm like reaching a nice equilibrium. So pulling
This allergy
through.
season has been really tough. Even
It's
I've been hit by
brutal.
it a bit, and I never
Yeah,
get
it's
allergies.
been, yeah, especially like at all the fields that we play at too. Like you can just see the pollen like
Yeah.
whizzing through the air, and it's a bit much.
At Yankee Stadium at the A's game that I went to, it was like just clunks of pollen like this big that were like literally just like getting on my face. And yeah.
Dude. Have you seen that like the fuzz that's been flying through the air of late? I don't know
Yeah.
if you noticed that, but it's everywhere. And I
Yeah.
don't even know if it's like pure pollen. I think it's some weird alien shit.
Yeah. All right. So we have our friend Joon Lee on for the second half of the episode to give kind of a general overview of where the Yankees are at. But first we're gonna recap um a few injury things, a few roster moves that are important, and this sweep with Cincinnati before the Yankees start up a tough 3-game series at home with Baltimore starting tomorrow, Tuesday. We're recording this on Monday evening. Um, Jake, you wanna get us going with some of these roster moves over the weekend?
Yeah, so I mean the easiest one to talk about is Sevy coming back to the, rotation on Sunday. Everyone kind of knew that was happening, saw it coming because they announced it last week. But everyone by says two corresponding moves, really. First, the Yankees decided to sign Greg Allen. I believe it was Friday night or Saturday morning. It was one of the two. And they immediately decided he was going to be on the major league roster. And they wanted him that same series. So that meant one player had to be DFA'd or sent down. We were speculating maybe it's going to be Waldo because he's struggling a little bit, or one of the other rookies. And it ends up in Aaron Hicks. It long time for that to happen. But we all kind of saw it coming. It still was pretty shocking to actually see it unfold the way that it did, because it did come off of one of his best 2 week stretches in probably a 3 year span at this point. He was playing really solid in the last 2 weeks, but ultimately, I don't think enough to justify keep spot. So it was the right at the end of the day. Um, Talk about a tumultuous career with the Yankees. Then you bring in Greg Allen, who plays the same exact position that he plays: center field, left field, right field, can move all around the outfield, switch hitters, so same profile there, except he's a role player. That's what he's always been as a bench player. And he's like completely comfortable in that role. And then on top of that, he provides the speed tool that Aaron Hicks simply didn't provide.
Yeah, and it's, a move that I think kind of shocked us now, given the timing of it. I mean, Hicks had a good few games, a nice stretch there, and I think that might have been the Yankees and Hicks handshaking, be like, hey, give me a chance, let me get some run. I mean, we shouted him out for Yankees heartbeat last episode. He didn't quite get it because he hadn't played enough games. So I think this is a chance that if Hicks gets released, he's not taking like a lowly minor league deal. I think there's a team that can convince themselves that Aaron Hicks has some value, a third, fourth outfielder on like a middling team. So I think it was in their best interest. I'm sure Hicks and his agent have been working on this for a while. It hasn't seemed that Hicks wants to remain a part of this team. And we'll talk a bit more about the Hicks DFA with Joon later, just to get a bit of the inside the clubhouse feel as he described. Um, I look back at Aaron Hicks's tenure overall really fondly. He had some awesome moments for the Yankees. I mean, the value of him in 2017 through 19, he was a really great player. He put his body at risk multiple times, returning, in retrospect, probably a bit precariously, maybe not precariously, but a bit early from injuries that have plagued him since, to compete for this team. Like he he went through Tommy John and came back and was a DH and, you know, stood out there in the outfield with a threat of his arm that wasn't at 100% health, some big home runs. I mean, even as recently as last year, he had a big home run against the Astros to tie up a ball game there. He was a really good Yankee overall. And I think where he's at this point, we shouldn't, where he's at this point is not good enough for the Yankees, but we shouldn't disregard how he put his body on the line to help a team that was in its window win when he was at the peak of his power. So I'm very grateful for Aaron Hicks. But I do think it was time. I'm not sad to see him go necessarily right now because we've been clamoring for the team to be getting better. And I think that's what they did, like you said, by getting Greg Allen.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Aaron Hicks, if I'm thinking fondly, I'm thinking about that game against the Twins that he had that was insane in 2019, where it was extra innings and he made a crazy acrobatic catch over his shoulder, pumped everyone up, and then I believe he got one of the either the winning hit or the go-ahead run or something like that. So, I mean, he has like his moments that are positive in Yankee history are like absolutely electric. It's just unfortunate that there are so many recent memories that are not that fun.
Our playoff lineup used to be DJ, Judge, Hicks, Stanton. Like that was the offensive value that Hicks brought. And you can talk about should Hicks have been there? Maybe, maybe not. You know, we're talking the analytical value of his walks and some of the pop that he had, but ultimately he was an awesome above average for sure fielding outfielder and a guy who got on base in front of some awesome table setters behind him and was an invaluable piece for a while. And I think he plugs up a roster spot now, and especially when you have someone who can give that defensive solidity like Greg Allen behind Bader in center field. We already saw him run this series, come in as a really plus pinch runner, who would know his role, who doesn't expect to be a day in, day out starter, which I think Hicks was expecting. I do think changes it changes the locker room and it changes the managerial options a bit better. It just fits everything that the Yankees need from that position that Hicks didn't want, nor did he provide very well. So I'm grateful to see Greg Allen come in. I mean, he was an awesome Yankee in 2021. He developed kind of a cult following in August as the Yankees went through some silly injury stuff in which you look at a roster from August of 21. That's featuring like no major league players. You're talking about like Clint Frazier, Greg Allen, Gary Sanchez, Ryan Lamar. So
Ryan Lamar, Yankees legend.
so glad to see Greg Allen back. Otherwise, Sevy comes back, and then the corresponding move off the IL for Sevy is to put Johnny Brito down. And I think we'll get into both of those performances from Brito and Sevy, who both pitched over the weekend. I think it was the right move to bring Brito down. Did you have any thoughts about someone else going down instead of Brito?
Well, so one more thing that I think we need to talk about because it does play into the battery is Trevi injury. We already touched on that last episode, but Ben Rortvedt immediately provided an impact in the games that he played, or the game that he played. He looked excellent behind the plate. He looks really good at framing. He looks good at calling the game, especially considering that was his first time catching Clay Holmes and that sinker. That was really so I was like fond of that. I just felt like that's something that we needed to touch upon. When it came to the pitching, like it feels like that they're kind of stuck with Clark Schmidt right now. It seems like that's going to be a guy that's going to get more opportunities, especially now that Domingo is down. And we'll see if Domingo even comes back. I'm sure he will because he's been effective, but I could also see them trying to move on from Domingo at some point. The nonsense that he's with them the last few years. That being said, Johnny Brito is the most sensible send down just because he has all those options. And he clearly needs to work on a few things if he wants to be an effective starter. He's got really good stuff. The fastball is excellent. The changeup is definitely a plus pitch, but you need a third pitch if you're going to get guys out 3 times through the order. And even 2 times through the order. Like we've just seen, how many batters have you seen grind at bats against him? It's too many.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think talking about Brito, I don't think, well, it is a little bit of a reflection of his performance, but it's not a punishment for his performance being sent down. I think Brito being on the major league team was more of a reflection of the Yankees injury issues. Brito in theory is like the eighth, ninth starter option for the Yankees, and he's your number 5 when you have Rodon, Montas, Sevy all hurt. So that's where he was coming in. We get Sevy back. Sevy looked really good, and we'll get into the games now in a second. So he's the move, and he has some development to do. And long term, Brito could be a better pitcher than Herman, than Clark Schmidt, but ultimately, he has some refining to do. He's still young. He hasn't had a lot of time in the minor leagues relative to other pitchers of the same level. So, wish Johnny Brito well. I I hope we don't see him this year because
Yeah.
that means someone else is hurt. Um, on top of Rodon not coming, like ideally we have Rodon back and Brito's 2 pitchers away. Right now he is the next call up ultimately, or and the Yankees have a few off days through June. I think they have 7 or they have like 12 in a row, but then they have 3 consecutive Mondays off throughout the month of June. I have to look at my calendar. That's why I'm peeking up this way. But including the off day today. So I think the Yankees are going to try and go on like a 4 or 5 man schedule as much as they can. So Clark might be flexed here and there, but Cole's going to go his 5. Nestor's going to go his 5. Sevy might do every 6th day or every 5th day on a pitch count. So we'll see how that works out for them. But they didn't want to go 6 man. And I don't think they have the talent or the depth to go 6 man, especially with the off days coming up. It's a smart move to send Brito down.
Yeah, I will also say that I really liked the game plan they had with the opener for the Blue Jays series. We talked about that already, but I think that's the way that you're going to get Brito to be most successful. If you can give him 6 outs and then he can come into the game rolling. That seems to be when he was at his most effective. But yeah, like we said before, his stuff is really good. He was throwing 97 and 98, so that's already a tool that you can build upon and just like create those secondary pitches a little bit better. But I am excited to see more of him. Like you said, let's not see it this year.
Yep. You want to get into these Reds games?
Let's do it.
All right, I have another 3-game recap. You want to count me down?
You got it. 3, 2, 1.
Be Lively says, New York, I love you, as Ben takes the mound to welcome the Yanks to Cincinnati for a 6:30 start. And before you can even turn your TV to yes, Judge is headed to Kentucky for a solo shot in the first. And like a weird Irish priest, Clark is happy to see right-handers as he gives a clean 5 despite some glove fuzz that didn't matter to anyone except David Bell. Don't care as Rizzo sneaks one inside the right field pole of Great American Small Park for a 2-run shot, scoring Aaron Judge in the 6th. A Jake Fraley double off Cordero scores Clark's 2 base runners for Cincy's only 2 of the game, as Higgy and Harrison tack on a few in the 9th. Yanks win game 1 6-2. Game 2 was like my family's attempt at Mexican food as Brito gets overcooked for 4 earned in 4 innings. But these Yankees went to Fantasyland as mythical creature Ben Rortvedt has a 2-hit day, scoring on Judge's base hits twice. And IKF goes deep again, only in Ohio, coming to fruition. And we get free baseball in the Buckeye State as Judge makes his Wendy's trip to go 4 for 4 and put the Yankees ahead on a Rizzo 2-run shot. He says, do you get deja vu when I hit 2, sneaking it again inside the right field pole for that homer? Yankees win 7-4 in game 2. Game 3 was a kooky 11:35 a.m. game on Peacock, and the weirdness carried over into the first as Spencer steers a ball fair that the umps called foul, was overturned after replay. But unlike the British Museum, the officials give India something for free as they award Jonathan and the Reds a free run. No errands allowed today as Booney gets tossed in solidarity of Judge's rest day and Hicks's DFA. After Sevy won a clean 75 pitches exactly on his return, 4 2/3 innings. A quiet morning until Bader brings the blast come 1 o'clock to put the Yankees up 2-1, followed by a brunch Glaber bomb. Yankees bring the brooms and sweep Greens Reds 4-1 final.
Never thought I'd hear Olivia Rodrigo and a Wendy's reference in the same but good shit.
I messed up the Olivia Rodrigo. I apologize to Olivia Rodrigo. I don't apologize to Joshua Batson. Team Olivia.
Team Olivia all day. Feeling pretty sour still.
What stands out to you from the sweep?
I mean, it's just the resilience of the offense to be able to come back again. They were down, what is it, 2 out of the 3 games or all 3 games? Or I think it was 2 out of 3. They were coming from behind and winning these games by like pretty much commanding victories all at both times.
Yep.
It feels like everyone's contributing again, which is really nice. But it's also you're like Judge and Rizzo are leading the charge, which is an essential part of this offense to be working. You need both of those guys producing. And one thing that also kind of concerns me a little bit, but was pushed to the back burner because everyone else is performing, is DJ LeMahieu was like pretty much a non-factor throughout this entire thing. So if you can get him cooking at the same time as those big guys, you're looking at a really good lineup. And Harrison Bader continued streak in the playoffs last season. He's a legitimate bat that can give you pop at any given moment. And then having just Greg Allen and Volpe and Bader on the field at the same time, you have so much athleticism to work with. So I'm excited about a lot of that. And then also I got to say that Clay Holmes looks a lot better coming into this role as like a 7th inning, 8th inning guy. Like everything about the way that he's throwing is exactly what you want to see out of him. He's getting the proper depth on his sinker again, and that was something that we were lacking a few weeks ago. So it feels like his mechanics are back in check, and that is huge.
Yeah, this was a nice series. The Yankees did what they should do with a team like the Reds and sweep. But in the past, the Yankees take 2 or 3. You don't have an issue. They take 1 out of 3, and you're like, oh, not the worst. Taking 3 out of 3 is going. You kind of stash it. I mean, obviously every win counts, but like you're able to put that in your pocket. So that way, when you have a day where you drop a series you're not supposed to, or you have a tough loss, like against the Rays, you can change this to the Yankees took 2 out of 3 at the Rays, and the Yankees took 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati. And all of a sudden it looks a lot different, but it's the same number of wins. So that's why sweeps are really important against bad teams. The Reds aren't a terrible team. They don't have great pitching, and it doesn't help that their best pitcher, Hunter Green, throws the ball like 105 miles an hour, and they play in a tiny stadium, and he elevates the ball. So he gives up a ton of home runs, but solo shots. Like Hunter Green had a better day than Severino, but Severino is kind of just a better pro, and the Yankees bats backed Sevy up, and he only went 75 pitches, so Hunter Green went 7 innings strong. But they let him run for 4 earned, but just a few blasts there. Yeah, a good showing from the Yankees. I was glad that on the Judge off day they give him the double off day today and yesterday, because the Yankees have a built-in off day today, and this offense came out. Bader was able to hit. Rizzo went off this whole series. IKF, Rortvet, Volpe, Glaber, extra base hits. I mean, pretty much across the board except for DJ, like you said, which is starting to be a concern. But awesome series from the Yankees.
I really hope he's not injured again. This is just kind of a similar type of dip off that he had to when he did get hurt last season, and it's coming very early right now. So I'm hoping it's just a mechanical tweak or his timing is a little bit off, but hopefully we get some more clarity on that situation soon.
Looking at DJ's stats, my computer's not loading, so that's why I'm on my phone here.
Gotcha.
Last 7 days, 0.095 batting average, 0.317 OPS, 3 total bases in 23 plate appearances. Push that going back the last 14. 182 batting average, 606 OPS, so a bit better. But that's included. I think he had 2 homers the week before, right? So 15 total bases in his last 49 plate appearances. And what's especially notable is the 180 batting average. That's where
Not
DJ's
DJ
yeah, his value comes from the high contact. Like I'll take the 700 OPS if it comes with 230 batting average. That's his dip, but 180 puts it dangerously low for what we need from him.
Yeah, if he has any kind of like lower body issue going on too, like he's such a weight shift hitter that if he's having issues landing or shifting his weight at all, like that could lead to him rolling over a little bit more. So I'd have to watch more of his ABs to see if that's the case, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. at this point.
I'm not looking at his batted ball stats. I'd be interested to see his Fangraphs numbers, but his BABIP is 143 in the last week. So
Which is
that generally means weak contact, which is a yellow, if not a red flag for DJ.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something to keep an eye on for sure.
What do you think of Clark's outing? He went 5 clean, and then he got 2 base runners. Cordero ultimately gave them up.
I will say his velo was up. Like I think he was pumping like a sneaky 96, which is like not bad for Clark at all. Definitely wasn't his worst start. Ones where it just feels like he's still missing that put away pitch. I think that he's just so much better accustomed to be a like long reliever than anything. But I'm not going to complain. They ended up winning. He kept them in arm's reach the entire time. So that's all you can really ask out of Clark. Yeah, he struck out like 6 too, so he was missing bats pretty well. Yeah, I mean, I've got really no complaints. I think that he did pretty well, all things considered.
He looked better. I mentioned it in the recap a bit. It was a very righty heavy lineup. And they didn't let him see Fraley. They took him out for Jake Fraley the 3rd time through. And that's who Cordero gave up the runs to. So that's why it goes 2 earned for Clark, but those were his inherited base runners on 1st and 2nd to start the 6th. Yeah, I thought he looked better. And this is kind of the ask from Clark. Go keep us in games against good teams that the offense can keep up, and then against bad teams, like keep it to 2, keep it to 3, and that's what he did. Give us 5 innings, let our bullpen work from there. Like these are going to be the games that we kind of grind out a bit more. And the Yankees didn't even grind this one out as much because they put up a number early on in the game. This was the only game where they were never behind. The other 2 games were both comeback victories. So yeah, I thought Clark, he did a nice job. Kept the line moving, and unlike Brito the next day, Brito kind of put us in a hole, giving up the 4 earned early on in the game. But then the Yankees fought back. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about him later. Aaron Judge is incredible. I mean, his fingerprints were all over this series. Yeah, it was kind of wild. I love the everyone on Twitter was kind of bringing it up, and the broadcast was like after game 2, they're like, disappointing day for Aaron Judge, no homer today. Just casual 4-for-4 day with 3 RBI and 2 runs scored. Got the game.
And the exit velo was probably like over 110 too, and he just missed like 1 or 2 homers as well. So that is an off day for him, but it's also a great day for just about anyone else.
Yeah, his double was like 114. It was just like a 5-degree exit velo. So
I think the most impressive hit that he got, that was like, I think he was down 0-2 or something like that. I think it was in game 3 or it was in game 1 or game 2 maybe. But he was down 0-2, and he just like fists the ball down the third baseline. That was still like easily 100 off the bat. And you're just like, how did he do that? How did he shorten up enough to that point to cover the entire strike zone? I don't know. He's superhuman.
speaking of fisting a ball at 100 miles an hour, what did you think of the Reds' decision to not walk Judge with 1 out in the 10th there with Greg Allen on 3rd? I was telling my girlfriend it was curious because like Judge's mistakes can be in that scenario can produce runs, because even when he gets jammed or on the end of the bat with a ground ball, like it's a lot of the time hard enough to get through an infield in scenario. Or if he misses a big swing at a home run, like he's going to hit it, his like soft fly ball is still a medium to far distance on a fly ball. So that's going to score the run. And ultimately, like he gets jammed and he just like gets it through. He got a lot of barrel on it still, but I don't know. I'm surprised they didn't want to face Rizzo. I mean, Rizzo hits the 2-run home run on the next pitch anyway, but I'm surprised they didn't set him up for the double play.
Yeah, I think it's more just like the Reds know that they're not going to be a playoff team, and they don't operate like one. So like, why try to make high leverage moves in a game that they already kind of accepted defeat in, even though it was close and they could have easily won it. That's just the feel that I get out of them. I don't know. Even like listening to Barry Larkin and all the guys during the Peacock pre-game, there was zero optimism that the Reds were going to win that game at all. So I don't know. It just feels
With their
like
best
they are.
pitcher on the mound too.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's not the type of mindset you want going into game 3, and they already lost the series at that point for that one. But yeah, I don't think that they were ever mentally in it to win it. Plain and simple.
I want to move on to Yankees heartbeat. We talked about him a bit.
Yep.
I'm gonna go first today. My heartbeat is obvious. It's Aaron Judge. And this is assisted by the Yankees tweet notification that I just got that Aaron Judge was named American League Player of the Week. Aaron
No
Judge, what do
way.
you think? What do you think his OPS was?
1.895.
I feel like you're cheating.
No,
1.893.
fuck. My phone is on the other side of the room right now, and I have not touched my keyboard at all.
Aaron Judge in the 6 games, and he had an off day on Sunday. 11 for 22, so a 500 batting average. 1.3 slugging for a 1.9 OPS. 5 homers, 2 doubles, 11 ribbies, 7 walks. 621 on base percentage. 63% of the plate appearances that Aaron Judge had, he was on base. Against, I mean, the Reds for 2 games and the Blue Jays for 4. And the Blue Jays are in theory a good team.
I don't think anyone has told Judge that he's not in AAA anymore. It's been like 7 years.
On Saturday, I think it was Paul O'Neill like exasperated after Judge got his 3rd hit, I think. And Paul's like, this is the major leagues, and he's putting up like video game numbers. Like this is like if little leaguers, if I had a stretch like Aaron Judge is having now at the big league level, I'd be like, I'm really good. I'm a great baseball player, even at like at our level, you know. It's insane.
That's like he has the right to be cocky about it just because he's proven that he can hit any pitcher that throws to him, essentially. If you're going to challenge me, better throw it where I can't hit it. And he hits it almost every time now. In the beginning of the season, he was just missing pitches. We saw him foul off a lot early on, and there was like a little bit of a timing. 95 OPS, atrocious, so bad. And clearly sarcastic. And then he turns that around once he gets back from what he worked on. But clearly he found his timing mechanism again, and he found the perfect swing path to get to just about any pitch that he needs to hit. And he's not chasing that low and away slider anymore.
Who is your heartbeat?
Rizzo. This is the Jizzo weekend, baby. I mean, he's so good. This is the Rizzo that everyone's wanted to see, and he's been doing it consistently all season now. I think he had one small stretch back last month where he wasn't that great. But that's also when the Yankees were struggling really hard as a collective unit. He was still carrying the weight, but he wasn't getting those big hits. He's done nothing but get big hits the last 3 weeks or so. Just the contact is up, the strikeouts are down, the power is up. Like that home run to right field was so majestic. His swing just looks so good right now. He's so locked in, and he's clearly just like that clubhouse presence that you need, like as the secondary enforcer to Aaron Judge. Where I think Judge might be a little bit relaxed with some guys. Like I don't know if Judge has that natural like fight. You know, he's just so big and imposing in the first place. He doesn't really have to do too much to get people's attention. I think Rizzo just is that guy that goes in, he doesn't care at all. He will go up to anyone and get in their face if he needs to and say, like, let's turn things around now. So it's awesome to see those guys working tandem. It's amazing.
That's a familiar subject. Judge and Rizzo were our heartbeats for the last episode over that stretch. And I mean, I'd love for them to continue because they are the heartbeat of this team from the middle of the lineup. It is a chore, and you can see it on the mound. Not only do Judge and Rizzo put up productive at-bats, which they've been doing, but they are brutal count pitch draining hitters to get through. Because they'll foul off a million balls. They'll take They'll take balls that are a ball or two off the plate. The umpires will give them the call most of the time. Judge has been more respected on that low strike, so it's very hard to attack him, and he can hit the ball low, he can hit the ball high. Rizzo can turn and keep balls fair that are on his hands that you have no idea how he gets his barrel inside of it. Um, Both of them are brutal, like not only productivity wise, but in terms of tiring out a pitcher. And that has a knock-on effect to every other hitter in the lineup. And I think it's helping the Yankees navigate from the bottom of their lineup when they know that they're going to get consistent production, or at least competitive at bats from the middle of their lineup, which I think was lacking for a bit of the Yankees stretch. I think Rizzo had a bit of a down stretch. And then with Judge out of the lineup, no Stanton. I think we saw that the Yankees' middle of the lineup wasn't as tedious, and now it's as tedious as it can be, and as talented. I can't even say as talented as it can be because Giancarlo Stanton is still waiting in the wings for the next few weeks. So we'll see how Stanton's recovery goes and what that looks like if Judge and Rizzo can keep up this pace, just getting on base in front of Stanton. We can look from 6-run games to 9-10 run games easily.
It's so much fun to think about. And it also brings into the question, like, we have more moves that are going to be like made throughout the season just to, deal with all the guys that are coming back. Stanton, and then, Rodon and Donaldson is a big one just because, like, where is he going to play? Is he going to play? Does he have a spot on this team anymore? Does Oswald Peraza have a spot on this team anymore? Like, we talked to June about this, but it's a legitimate question that, like, I think needs to be asked and addressed at some point. But it's a good problem to have because everyone right now is performing. So I'd rather more difficult decisions be made in this type of situation rather than a situation where everything's reaching its melting point or like boiling point, and in a negative way. And you just have to make decisions out of pure desperation. So I feel it's time for the Yankees to be very strategic with their following moves.
I think that's everything we got on the Cincinnati series. Right now, coming up, we're going to bring you our interview with Joon Lee, and he's going to kind of level set, how we should be feeling about the Yankees, where we go from here. He has some awesome insight based on some other teams in the region, in the AL East especially. So stick around, hear our interview with Joon Lee, and then when we get back from that, we're going to preview the upcoming series with the second place Orioles and the Padres over the weekend. All right, we are joined once again by our friend Joon Lee. He is a staff writer for ESPN.com, covering the Northeast sector of baseball that's had a lot going on, including our Yankees. Joon, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm glad that I'm like sitting in front of a microphone versus like sitting on a bench outside the spring training facility this time.
That was a fun whirlwind for us.
You're officially our first return guest as well, so it's pretty cool.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, of course. It's always a pleasure.
So the last time we spoke to you, like you said, was in spring training. There was a lot of question marks still at that time. The Yankees have had a roller coaster of a season, it seems, so far already through 6 weeks. I mean, they were in last place. Granted, they were above 500 through April. But now they've been the best team in baseball in the month of May since then. They still sit in third in the AL East. A lot of ups and downs. I mean, how should Yankees fans feel on overall through this first 6 weeks?
I mean, I think that there was a level of panic, which is understandable to a degree, about the Yankees in terms of just like the talent actually performing up to its standard. But there was also so many injuries, like, on a day-to-day basis, like when I go to the stadium, so much of my job is for ESPN.com now. Like, we don't necessarily write about the games on a day-to-day basis unless something crazy happens. And so a lot of what I write when I go to the ballpark is injury updates. And so when I go to Yankee Stadium, it felt like every single day, it was not just like one injury update, but it was 3 injury updates for, guys in the lineup, whether it was Harrison Bader, Aaron Judge, or someone in the rotation, Severino, Rodon, you name it. And so it was just not the team that the Yankees built heading into the season. And I think Brian Cashman said that, I think it was 5 weeks into the year or something when he had his almost annual at this point, like, I believe in this team, don't panic. press conference. And I think we're at the point where you're starting to see kind of the totality of the talent on the Yankees roster actually come to fruition. I mean, you know, Garrett Cole's having an incredible year so far. You know, I think it's 2.8 wins above replacement. And then you look at the rest of the position players on the roster. Aaron Judge, despite missing games, has a tick under 2 wins above replacement. Anthony Rizzo is having an incredible year at the plate. Anthony Volpe, despite not hitting above 215 for most of the season, is third on the team in wins above replacement. Harrison Bader has been incredible since coming back from the injury list. He's kind of continued that playoff home run hitting tear that he was on coming into this regular season. So, when I look at the Yankees, I picked them to, I think they'll either make it to the World Series or win the World Series this year. This is one of the most talented teams in baseball. And as much as Yankee fans love to panic about this team, you look at the talent up and down this roster, like if everything hits at the right time, that this is going to be one of the best teams in baseball over the course of 162 games. And they just need an opportunity, if they're all healthy, to show that.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I mean, injuries were rampant well before the season even started. And I think that was kind of one of the more jarring things for Yankees fans, because a lot of the times we would get plagued with the injuries mid-season. This came so early that you didn't really know what the starting alignment was going to look like, going into the first month of the year. And all things considered, I mean, we definitely kind of pumped the panic brake maybe a little bit too early. But they stayed above 500 that entire time. And I think that's just insanely impressive considering they are in by far the most competitive division.
Yeah, I think that's really important context, is that this is such a tough division right now. I mean, the Blue Jays, I think, are, as we currently speak, in last place, and they would be tied for first place in the AL Central right now. Like, this is such an incredibly competitive division. I think that, the schedule realignment is playing a huge role in just the record of all these teams, and I think is going to benefit the AL East in terms of setting them up for the wild card race, because the teams aren't beating each other up as much anymore versus beating up on the rest of baseball. And so when I kind of look at all of that too, I think it kind of factors into the Yankees' favor, because as hot a start as the Rays are off to, they're starting to close the gap with the rest of the division now. They're coming back down to earth. The Orioles are 2.5 games behind. The Yankees are 5.5 games behind. And it wasn't that long ago. I think it was like a week and a half ago, the Yankees were in last place, and now they're in third place. So I think we're just going to see this kind of like maneuvering throughout the division for basically the entire season, because I think that all these teams are capable of finishing above 500. We'll see if that actually turns out to be the case. But I don't know. I look at the Yankees. I still see one of the most competitive teams, competitive rosters in all of baseball. And on top of that, you're still getting Carlos Rodon back at some point. And Rodon has clearly been pushing the Yankees to try to throw more, and they've been the ones holding him back, because I feel like there's been this narrative online, especially in the Yankee fan base, about Rodon being injury prone. He's been pushing to try to get back on the field, and the Yankees have been the one that have been cautious. And so I think that there's been a little bit of an unfair portrayal of Carlos in that regard. But when Carlos has been healthy throughout the course of his entire career, he's been an extremely dominant pitcher, especially the last couple of years. The health has always been a question with him, and so we'll see whether or not that lasts. But I mean, Garrett Cole's off to one of the best starts of his career this year, and it's hard to kind of discount that when factoring in the Yankees' postseason chances.
Yeah, no, we've talked quite a bit actually about how Garrett Cole just seems like his mentality's kind of completely changed this year. And he chalked it up to being his like first normal season with the Yankees, where he doesn't have to deal with COVID. He doesn't have to deal with like the shortened spring training due to the lockout and all that. So we're seeing him much more settled in Garrett Cole. And that has directly resulted in him giving up fewer home runs and challenging guys more in like better quadrants of the zone, rather than getting frustrated and trying to throw fastballs right down the middle at 100 miles an hour. So it's really cool to see him take this massive leap with the Yankees, because we all knew that he was capable of it, but it finally seems like he's reaching his potential as like that top ceiling of being an ace.
Yeah, and I think that an underrated aspect in all of this is that Garrett's always been the kind of guy who is very cerebral on the mound, thinks a lot about the intention of every single pitch that he throws. And I think that the pitch clock and speeding him up and giving him less time to kind of overthink on the things on the mound has been a benefit. That's been kind of one of the whispers that I've heard around the team, is, there's always the sense of like trying to help manage Garrett's mindset and making sure that he has the right mentality when he's on the mound. Because we've seen not just in the Bronx, but throughout the course of his entire career, where he's had those moments where things start to really speed up on him, then he overthinks things and he kind of falls apart mentally on the mound. And I think that the pitch clock has actually been a huge benefit for him in terms of, okay, there's a certain amount of time. I just got to choose my pitch and I throw it, because it's easy to forget, I guess, when Garrett does fall apart mentally on the mound, that this guy just has some of the best pure stuff in all of baseball. And sometimes you don't need to overthink like placement and location, all that stuff and sequencing, when you just can dominate guys with one of the high spin rate fastballs in all of baseball and an incredible slider. Like, that's sometimes all you need. And I think that Garrett has been able to kind of take advantage of that this year.
Yep, 100%.
The Yankees, especially since Bader and Judge have gotten back from injury, have been kind of riding their performance. I mean, Rizzo, as you mentioned, has been unreal all year. Judge has gone back to his otherworldly rate of contribution. And Garrett Cole, like you said, has been one of the best pitchers in baseball, has just a sub-3 WAR as a starting pitcher, which is unreal through the first 6 weeks of the year. You mentioned the talent that the Yankees have, but do you think that they're relying too much on their top end talent? Is this level of performance sustainable, especially given how competitive the East is?
I mean, I think that it's okay to ride your top end talent through stretches of the season. And I think that the Yankees are in a perfectly fine stretch where they're supposed to do that. But I do think that you bring up the valid concern of needing the depth of this roster to eventually shine through, like needing DJ LeMahieu to hit more than 250. Like, as good as Volpe has been in the field, and when he gets on base, he's been a dynamic base stealer as well. You need him to hit more than 212 throughout the course of the entire year. And he's a guy who barely spent any time in AAA. And so the jump from, mostly AA at bats to a handful of AAA at bats to major league pitching is enormous. Like, the best AAA pitcher is a borderline major league, reliever, sometimes starter. And then you're suddenly facing guys of the caliber of like, the best pitchers in the sport, Justin Verlander, all that stuff. Not necessarily that saying that they faced the Yankees this year, but though that caliber of pitcher you're suddenly facing is a huge jump. And so, they're eventually going to need to get Giancarlo Stanton back and healthy and hitting. And the bottom third of this order is something that really concerns me. Like, Oswaldo Cabrera hasn't been as good this year. The depth of the lineup hasn't been as good, but you need Gleyber Torres to be better. You need the rest of that roster to be better in order for this team to, I think, ostensibly to plausibly make a deep run into the postseason. Because, as much as we love talking about star power in baseball, like, I think the Angels show year after year that like having the best star power isn't necessarily something that leads to postseason success. And I think that's spot on, in that like the rest of this team needs to step up as well.
Yeah, we're in a weird spot with Gleyber because he is really good at like a lot of things that you need from a good baseball player. In terms of like batting with runners in scoring position, he's excellent at moving guys, to either third or scoring them even. But it just seems like he makes these mental errors time and time again. And like those lapses is what makes him so frustrating to watch. It's because you really want him to like secure himself as the starting second baseman. But he just, I don't know. I can't get over that hump with him sometimes.
I think part of it too is that like the expectation with Gleyber when he came in was like one of the top prospects in baseball, right? And when he came up, there was all this hype around him about him being, one of the best middle infielders in the entire sport. And then what you've gotten is, flashes of brilliance at times, but then there's just like those frustrating things. I think it doesn't help too that like in 2019 he almost hit 40 homers, and you felt like you were starting to get a glimpse of like, oh, this guy could be really a superstar middle infielder. And then obviously, he's had his struggles at shortstop over the years defensively. But he had a great season last year. He had 4 wins above replacement. As frustrating as he is, like, he is a guy that can contribute to a winning team over the course of the entire year. And part of me wonders if it's like the Yankee fan base just need to recalibrate what they think about Gleyber and what they think his potential is. Like, I feel like that's the case with a lot of top prospects, where it's so easy to hype guys up. But when you look back at the top prospect lists over the years, how many of those guys actually end up fulfilling that's like superstar potential? And like Gleyber becoming like a guy who puts up 3 to 4 wins a year, like, it's not necessarily the superstar that you would have expected, but I feel like most teams take that like 9 times out of 10 without the hype context like Gleyber came up in. And so, this just might be the guy that it is. And I would say that like the majority of teams around baseball would probably take Gleyber Torres as their second baseman, frustrations included. When you kind of take away the context of him being this like, top tier prospect when he was coming up, I think when you remove that, it's kind of easier to accept what he is. And you kind of accept that like, this is kind of what the entire package is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and that leads into another question. What happens with Oswald Peraza? Because it seems like Volpe is going to get every opportunity to be the full-time shortstop at this rate. So, I mean, Peraza was right up there with prospect rankings up until this season, and then that kind of has diminished real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is the Yankees approaching the shortstop competition in the manner that they did, and not even thinking about Peraza as the starting shortstop on opening day. And I think that like being willing to go to Volpe with him having so few AAA at bats, it makes the other teams around baseball be like, all right, so if the Yankees are willing to do that, like how valuable is this guy? Because I think one of the things that often gets missed in the conversation around top prospects is that a lot of this is just projections and teams selling the quality of their prospects from the scouts to the front office to reporters who make this list. And so oftentimes I think the Yankees are as good at selling the hype around their top prospects as anyone. It is often a mix of like how much of this is reality versus how much this is the Yankees hype machine just like overwhelming the media ecosystem. And I don't know the answer to that just because I never saw Oswald Peraza like coming up through the minor leagues, and so I can't say for sure like whether that hype was justified coming up. But I mean, what we've seen in the major leagues, it hasn't necessarily been what we've expected. And would it be the first time that you saw this from a Yankee prospect as well?
Yeah, it's just tough because his glove is so good.
Yeah. I mean, and like I think that's part of why he's going to continue to get opportunities in the major leagues. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen as the starting shortstop of the Yankees because they're going to give Volpe every single opportunity to succeed. Because if they wanted to bench him, they could have at this point. Like they could have said that he's hitting 212, but you look at the position player stats on the Yankees, like he's third in BWAR right now, despite hitting 212, which I think shows kind of the totality of his contributions on the team. And so it's tough to see at this point where the room is. Like I would much rather be Oswaldo Cabrera than I would be Oswald Peraza. Like obviously Oswaldo's struggling this year, but I was talking to him like a couple weeks ago, and he's just constantly preparing to play literally every position on the field at any given moment, and he knows that that's what his value is towards the Yankees. And we've seen him hit, and so I think that like I'm really curious to see how someone like him develops because he's such a modern MLB player in terms of like the potential versatility that he brings on a day-to-day basis. But I would much rather be in his position than I would be in Peraza's position.
100%. And his just personality and everything is built for Yankees.
Oh my God, he's built for New York. He loves playing in New York.
Yeah.
I think the Volpe conversation is super interesting because you wrote that awesome piece that came out on opening day about his family being New Yorkers and his time coming up as a top prospect. And obviously the Yankees are investing that time in him. But you mentioned, he's a below or right at league average offensive player right now. I mean, 89 OPS plus, below league average, WRC plus puts him a bit above from that recent home run stretch. And I think the stolen bases that he adds, but he's third in the Yankees in BWAR, like you mentioned, and that's coming from fielding, even though he's made a few errors. That's coming from how he can be a menace on the base paths. His development has been really accelerated. So I think the Yankees do need better production from their shortstop. But what are the Yankees expecting from Volpe this year? Where do they see him progressing and getting to that level that they could use, or are they still kind of putting him in the background and letting him develop?
They're being so cautious in how they talk about him because I'll see Boone talking in press conferences where people are just asking about like the expectations and what they want out of Volpe and where they want to hit him. And Boone is always just like, he's so vague in how he talks about him because he doesn't want to put any expectations on him. But I think everyone knows that they are also expecting him to do something. I mean, I've seen him, Volpe, walking around the clubhouse the last couple of weeks. And I remember the first couple of weeks of the year, he was clearly like overwhelmed by the entire experience, like being in New York, being a Yankee, being in the major leagues, adjusting to all of that. And the last couple of weeks, he's kind of settled in, and I think he's a little bit more chill than he was the first couple of weeks. And so for me, I'm really curious to see, like, especially in the second half of the year, what he ends up looking like, because he's going to have some time to process and make adjustments to the adjustments that major league pitchers are making to him. I think they're expecting him to at least be a league average shortstop, from a from the totality of his production, both offensively and defensively. I think that he's, pretty much doing that. I think that they're pretty impressed by the amount of pop that he's showing. Like, it seems like his swing is kind of well catered to Yankee Stadium. Like, he's not going to have light tower power, but he hits the ball the other way, and that's going to scoot over the fence sometimes. He's got line drive power that goes over the left field fence pretty frequently. He's a guy who I think is going to hit for power, and so I think they're just waiting for him to hit for a higher average. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we go through a stretch at some point in the next couple of months where he hits like 350 for 2 weeks, and his batting average only goes from 220 to 260. I think that feels like a realistic place that the team is kind of expecting him to be. But again, they're being super vague about how they talk about him, because they've thrown him in the leadoff spot. Like, you don't just do that, especially when you're a team like the New York Yankees that has a playoff expectations. They clearly have a lot of faith in him, and they're trying to show through their actions how much faith they have. I think it's just a matter of that faith coming to fruition. And for me, like, I kind of believe that it's going to happen at some point. It's just a matter of when.
I know you probably haven't gotten the chance to be with the team since Aaron Hicks was DFA'd. But that was a move that I think came a bit quicker than we thought it would, though I know a lot of Yankees fans were clamoring for it.
Not soon enough in the eyes of so many.
Yeah. Aaron Hicks was the longest tenured position player on the Yankees. I mean, it seemed like he was really revered by teammates. He had a nice stretch before he was finally DFA'd, in which the team was really celebrating him. How do the players like Aaron Hicks? I know there's a lot of issues in like going to reporters and stuff over the last year, his discontentment, but how is he viewed in the locker room, and how do you think this might impact how the players feel?
I think when people think about Aaron Hicks, they think about the totality of his impact on the Yankees. And so, it's when a guy's struggling to the degree that he's struggling, it's hard for that to not affect other people, because you just come to the ballpark and like you're getting prepared to be booed, and you just have kind of this negative aura around you. Like, it was kind of true around Joey Gallo last year. And so I think that like he always tried to bring as positive an attitude as he could considering the circumstances, but it's impossible to not have that kind of struggle affect you, or just manifest in some sort of insecurity. And that's kind of understandable. Like, you're getting booed on like opening day, and people want you off the team from the get-go. Like, I've never been in that position where, you're in a stadium, 45,000 people on a nightly basis, and, people are booing you at every single opportunity. And so I think when you're struggling to that degree, it's hard for it to not have some sort of like a negative effect on the vibe of the clubhouse. Cause I don't know, we've all been around negative people before. When things are going bad for someone, it's, you want to support them as much as you can. But if that negativity gets to a point where it's, vibrating off of you, and it's coming to the media too, like the way that he talks about his time in New York, it's hard to not let that at least moderately affect the vibe of the clubhouse. So I think that there's kind of this multifaceted opinion about him where, people understand like he's been here with the Yankees for such a long time. He's had, a very accomplished career in many regards. And he's also, in more recent years, been someone who has struggled a lot and has carried that aura around him, and that affects the clubhouse.
Do you think that wrist sheath injury he had a few years ago might be like one of the biggest parts of his downfall as a Yankee? Just because it seems like that's one injury that is very difficult to come back in terms of like the power tool and stuff like that. I mean, his arm is finally back to where it was post TJ, but it seems like that injury in particular is what's caused his swing to fall off significantly.
I mean, I've never talked to him about that, so I don't necessarily want to speculate, but I do think that there has been like a mental aspect to all of this, in terms of just like, when you hear the boos all the time, and like Aaron Boone last year was constantly talking about like having to manage Aaron Hicks and be cognizant of kind of his mindset and his headspace because he was struggling and trying to like, you know, direct him in the right direction without also like letting that negativity almost spread to everyone else, because the Yankees were very good last year, but here was this guy who's like really struggling, having literally the worst time of his career, and you need to kind of make space for all of that while also trying to keep your eyes on the bigger picture goal. And so it was easy to kind of see how the mental stuff would affect him at the plate in terms of his headspace. And so, I don't necessarily want to speculate on the injury just because like I haven't talked to him about that, but I think it was pretty clear that like just there was a snowball effect over the course of the last couple of years in terms of how all of this was affecting him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Get us tickets into the Boston, New York sports writers softball game, and we'll boo you, and then you can let us know how that feels.
I think it's in
Yeah.
like a week and a half. It's our like our annual game at Yankee Stadium is I think it's like the first week of June or something. So I'm excited about that.
How
Nice.
does one get tickets to such an event?
I don't think it's ticketed. I think you just got to know someone and you got to show up, at the security gate at the right time.
We just be like, hey, we knew in June he's actually on the team. So,
I'm pitching for Team Boston though, so
oh, never mind.
Exactly. We're gonna boo. We have to go. We have to get in the bleachers and just yell from out there. The echoes. I played there in high school, and there was a lot of people, but only like 1,000 people in the bowl at Yankee Stadium. It sounds like completely empty, which it is. But everything you hear is like echo, echo, echo. Like
yeah.
it's very eerie. Um, and speaking of Boston, this AL East has been on fire. Everyone really, except for the Blue Jays of recently. And that means the Red Sox too, who by all accounts most accounts anyways, were projected to be in last place. Didn't seem to have the pitching there. Right now, they're only 2 games behind the Yankees. Baseball Reference still projects them to only have a 23% chance of making the playoffs. But they've put together a bunch of good stretches. I mean, we haven't seen the Red Sox yet. What should we expect from this Red Sox team? What's good about them?
I think that they've been consistently inconsistent. So they'll go through stretches where they look incredible and the offense is clicking and like Chris Sale is great, and the pitching looks great. And then you'll have nights like Corey Kluber, giving up 6 runs in 2 innings, which has kind of been his entire season. Nick Pivetta, recently got moved from the starting rotation to the bullpen. So I think you're going to have, times where this team looks fantastic. Alex Verdugo's had an incredible season from the leadoff spot. He's kind of had the breakout season that people have been waiting for him to have for a couple of years now, and people were starting to doubt whether he would actually have. Devers is still Devers. I think Jaron Duran has been one of the most valuable offensive players for this team after going through a stretch last year where he was kind of reviled by the fan base because of how he was handling kind of the criticism, and going back and forth with fans during the middle of games. Like Connor Wong, their catcher, has been very good this year. He's got a win above replacement. Masataka Yoshida has hit 300 and has been very consistent offensively for the most part. There's a lot of kind of bright spots for this team, but I think the thing that I think is actually the opposite problem for the Yankees is that like the baseline talent is not nearly as high as like the Yankees. And so they kind of need like every single thing to click for this team to have a shot at the postseason. And you look at this roster right now, at least offensively, like everything you needed to click has kind of been clicking in terms of Alex Verdugo and Duran and Connor Wong and Yoshida. Adam Duvall's been injured, but like, you've had like a lot of levels of the offense clicking, and the pitching has kind of been inconsistent too. And so, they'll go through stretches where they look like, they can beat any team in baseball. And then they'll also go through stretches where they'll get swept by last place teams. And so I think that this is kind of the dynamic that a lot of people expect to see around this team for the entire year. They'll go through periods where they're a couple games above 500. Maybe they'll go through a couple stretches where they're below 500 and they're going to be barely hanging on in the wild card race throughout the course of the season.
Do you think they're going to be buyers or sellers when it comes to the trade deadline, or?
Oh man.
Loaded question.
I think it's going to really depend on where they are at the trade deadline. If they're like close, then maybe, but they're so dependent on like selling the future for this team that I have a hard time believing that Heim is going to go out and trade like Miguel Bleis and Sedan Rafaela. And, I think Marcelo Myers is going to jump up in the prospect ratings by midseason this year. And so it's kind of hard to see them like dealing any of their prospect depth because they're really selling the future of this team on that. I think there's a chance they might just like hold, maybe get some starting pitching help around the edges to like kind of fill in that gap that they thought Kluber or Pavetta might fill, but it's hard to see them kind of going all out and like going for it this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good for the Yankees anyway. But the longer the Red Sox stick around, the tougher it's going to be. And I think we're fortunate this year to have that distributed schedule. So that way the talent of the AL East is kind of getting more reflected in the record than it's been in the past. So we'll see how it goes. We're going to have a lot of fights with the Red Sox throughout the summer. And I think we'll check in with you between, if we can at some point, about the halfway point between some of those fights. So Joon, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you level setting our expectations of our crazy Yankees fandom, being that inside information. Jake, any last words?
No, thank you again for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you on and talking Yankees and just AL East in general, and then whatever else comes our way.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, have a good one.
Catch you later.
All right, that was Joon Lee, a staff writer for ESPN.com, giving us the insight about the Yankees locker room, what the Yankees are feeling, how we should feel. Jake, what are your takeaways from that?
I mean, it's always a pleasure having them on. This was a great conversation. It makes me cautiously optimistic and also nervous to see the Red Sox just because there is a lot of firepower in that offense. But I do believe that we ultimately have the edge over them pitching wise. I think our rotation is just far and wide stronger, even with all the injuries we have right now. Sebi being back is huge. Once we get Rodon back, I'll feel very, very confident. I think also just having Garrett Cole as your reliable, durable ace is always going to give you an edge over another team. But there are bats to be aware of in this lineup. I think that Justin Turner's got plenty of pop still left in his tank. Yoshida's really good. There's a few guys having career seasons for them. June talked about, Alex Verdugo. So that's a guy you need to watch out for. He's always kind of been a Yankees killer. So it'll be very interesting to see them. And I think the Yankees at this rate have a very comfortable stance in third place at the moment. It's just a matter of keeping on, winning these series with conviction and trying to go for the sweeps rather than just the 2 out of 3. You can do that, but at the same time, you still need to cover ground. They've proven at this point that they can hold up against the Rays, so they just need to do that against the Orioles and then also the Red Sox as well.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting question that you had about the Red Sox being buyers or sellers, and that stumped June, who is a Red Sox fan, for all transparency. And I think it brings up an interesting thought to have just about the structure of the playoffs, because we're at a point now where every AL East team is in competition for not only the AL East now that the Rays are kind of coming back to earth, but at every wild card spot. But simultaneously, you have a lot of teams that are very average, that are like 500, even below 500 at this point, who are still in competition for the AL West and the AL Central, respectively. So I think June and July are going to have a big bearing, obviously, on how the standings look. But there's a chance that 2/3 of the American League still thinks they have a shot at the playoffs, whether that be clinching through the wild card spots or through their division, having a reasonable shot. So how many are going to be sellers? How many are going to be buyers? June mentioned that the Red Sox philosophy, and this is kind of the philosophy of Chaim Bloom and Fenway Sports Group overall, is really to cater and develop their prospects. So given a winning team now, if they have an outside shot, if they're looking at a 7th, 8th seed, are they really going to make a move? Are they going to leverage those pieces? It doesn't seem like they will. But for now, the Red Sox are going to want to keep putting it on. I think their pitching is bound to fall off, so I'm not too scared of them. I am scared of the Orioles, and I think that's where we get to with this next series. Um, we're in a fortunate spot where we have Cole and Nestor are 1 and 2. I think that Nestor game is the big wild card because Clark Schmidt starts game 3, and there's a lot of lefties, a lot of really good lefties in this Baltimore lineup. I mean, Cedric Mullins, Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rushman, Anthony Santander. At the top of the lineup, that's going to be a nightmare for Clark to get through. So I'm hoping for 2 out of 3. That's what the Yankees should be doing. With teams that are second, third in their division, they should be sweeping the teams that are fourth, fifth in their division. But we'll see. We can't lose the series at home to the Orioles. They've been on a tear. Like they've been catching up. They're only 2.5 behind the Rays, and the Rays had one of the best starts in baseball. I mean, the Yankees have had this awesome run. They're still 5.5 behind. So, we shouldn't scoff at the Orioles because at the beginning of the season, we look at this next 6-game stretch, Orioles and Padres. We think that the Orioles are like the middling team that we get through, and then the Padres are the big weekend, big ticket series, which is what the Yankees promotions have for the weekend. But right now, it's the opposite. The Orioles seem like the real contender, and the Padres are kind of like this very average team.
Yeah, it's hard to make out what's going on in San Diego. It could be just like an just a surplus of firepower and talent that doesn't mesh well, or like a philosophical issue within the coaching or the development or something. It just doesn't feel right over there. But with this Orioles team, it feels like the exact opposite. They've got great chemistry. I think their biggest question mark ultimately is going to be their starting pitching, just because that's where, once again, I think when you compare and contrast the Yankees to them, the Yankees do ultimately have that slight edge, assuming you're getting the best version of Nestor. I think that's a very important aspect of that. And like you said, 2 out of 3 is important, but I think the first 2 out of the 3 is what you need to be going for. Win 2 games straight, and then you're okay for game 3, because that Clark game has so much like uncertainty behind it.
The Yankees have they have an off day built in, but they have 12 games in 13 days. We have all 3-game series. Baltimore at home, Padres at home, away in Seattle, and then away at the Dodgers. What is the record you want to see?
You said 13 games, right? Or 12 games?
12 games.
I would say 8-4 would be lovely. That's a good team right there. 9-3 would be fantastic. 10-2 would be otherworldly, and anything above that is god tier.
9-3, I'm in World Series mode. Haven't been there yet this year. Last year, I was in World Series mode for the whole year, except for the last 2 weeks of August, I think. 8-4 is like good team. We have a chance. That means we're making significant headway on either great National League teams. Padres are in theory great. Or we're knocking off our main competitors. Like I think right now our biggest competitors in the league are like the Mariners, the Astros, the Orioles, the Blue Jays, like for those wild card spots.
Yeah.
So
that's the other thing is like I think the AL West is going to be such a crazy, just competition between those 3 teams. Like the Rangers look unstoppable right now. Their offense is amazing. And then the Astros are on a hot tear. I think they're like 11-4 in their last 15 or something along those lines. They just got Altuve back, so they'll be a lot better. But their pitching is a little bit suspect in terms of all the injuries that they have, but they'll piece it together. And then the Mariners, they haven't quite got into that hot streak just yet, but it's bound to happen. There's so much firepower on that offensive side. It's going to be really a battle, because I think all those teams realize if they don't win the division, they're probably not making it to the playoffs at all, just because of the AL East.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that kind of wraps up our conversation. We're going to be coming to you hopefully at the end of that Padres series, or maybe sometime during that Mariner series. Got some late games. That road trip is not going to be fun for us watching those late nights, but we'll get through it. We'll bring you all the recaps if you're not gonna watch after the third inning or so. Anything else you want to rip off before we head out?
I think we covered just about everything we need to cover.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. This is a fun episode. If you skip to the end, make sure you listen to the part with Joon Lee. Joon's awesome. You can follow him at Joon on Instagram, at Joon Lee on TikTok, some variety. Most importantly, he doesn't need it as much as we do. At Pinstripe_Pulse on Twitter, at Pinstripe Pulse Pod on Instagram and TikTok. We'll be coming to you soon. Yanks are great. Let's go, Yanks.
Go Yanks.